Old Path in our study through the Old Testament book of Job. We make it to chapter 20, and let's have you turn there. What I want to do before we get there, it's so many weeks that we've gone into this, and really the back and forth has run its course kind of a long time ago, and we kind of lose sight rather of the fact that this didn't start out this way. And so I'm going to go back and revisit, if I can, something that we see in the very beginning of this. We haven't even seen it since the second week of our study through Job. And before we do that, we're going to be looking at chapter 2. I want to just kind of point out something that you'll kind of notice in this. If you've been following it carefully, let's remember that there are three guys that came to Job as a desire to comfort him. And now it's just gone to the point where the three are saying one thing and Job is saying another. And it almost seems like at times they're saying the same things, but they just don't understand why these things tend to happen. And again, the first part, when they first started to say the things that they said to Job, it was good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. Now it looks as though they've both reached the point, Job and some of the people that are talking with him have said, well, there is a thing that may happen in the lives of some wicked people, and they may have some kind of comforts, but their end is going to be just really horrible, and they've got to ultimately stand before their maker, but they'll eventually come to ruin, not like right away. So it's kind of a weird thing to watch as this morphs and changes kind of through the chapters, but it just again shows how this has long since passed any sense of usefulness to the people. And again, for us, as we read through this, again, it's a historical account at this point for us, but it also does serve, I think, a useful purpose for us in how it is that we interact with people if we are asked to give counsel or comfort or peace or whatever it may be. And if it gets to the point where you're not being heard by the other person, one or two things. What you're saying is so off base, like it is what they're saying towards Job. Not that he's innocent, but what they're accusing him of, he's completely innocent. Now, at that point, whoever's saying what they're saying to him should step back, and one of two things. He's not listening. There's no sense in going further with this. Or maybe we're off base. In either case, there's no sense to keep saying the same things. And so this is for chapters we've been going through this, and it has long since been useful to any person who's hearing any part of it. In fact, now it's just become bitter, and it's become very much, I would just say, useless by the people that are engaging in it. And there's nothing of any fruit that's come out of it. So it long since should have ceased, and we've got a few chapters before we get to the next section, starting at chapter 31, and then there'll be another kind of a third party guy that thinks he's got it all figured out. So that part will be kind of interesting when we get there, and it goes on for a number of chapters. So what we're looking at here, I just want to, I guess you can almost say, hit a reset in this, just to be reminded of where this started out and how it should never have gotten to this point. So let's go to the second chapter here, and I want to read something very quick, and then we will move on to the study. In verse 11 of chapter 2, we read this. Now, when Job's three friends, they're referred to here as friends, heard of all of the adversity that had come upon him, each one from his own place, Eliphaz, and then Bildad, and then Zophar, they had made appointment together to come to him, to mourn with him, and to give him comfort, or to comfort him. And when they raised their eyes from afar, they did not recognize him. They lifted their voices, they wept, and each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head towards heaven, so they sat down with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his grief was very great. So just looking back on that as the opening part of this whole study, and this whole back and forth and this whole historical thing, it starts out everything is like it should be. An unspeakable calamity has happened to him that has so many moving parts to it. It is so thorough and so complete. And now all of his loss is obvious, but now he's starting to have, in the personal sense, physical problems that are going on. And so they come and they're just overwhelmed. What do we say to a person like this? They just remain silent. He's a friend to them. And they are friends to him. That's the way that it's set up. What changes, obviously, if you've been studying through this, you'll know that they are convinced that they know the cause of this. And then ultimately the only reason that this is going on is because Job has something that he has done that's offended God. And if he would just come clean with the whole thing, take it before God, listen to their counsel, then God could forgive and begin the matter of restoration. And we know Job's answer is like, guys, I understand what you're thinking. As it starts out, it's not like that. And I don't understand why these things have happened, but I haven't done anything that is evil. And Job starts to do some searching in his own mind, trying to figure out how this works, and that, God does what he's going to do, but he's my oppressor, and not because of any wrong that I have done towards him. If I've done something, I've tried to acknowledge it, even those things I can't even think of, and yet the problems persist. You guys know, if you've been studying along, you know this very, very well, how this has gone on. At some point, it takes a very weird turn in that the people who are supposedly his friends and advising him, when they don't see that they're getting where they're going, it's almost that they become more incensed at his rejection of their counsel and his denial for his culpability. And so this is what we've been seeing for weeks now, just this back and forth, back and forth. And I'm not here to tell you today that it's going to end. Actually, it's just as offensive as it's ever been. And they're getting to the point where you're getting towards the end of what these three men are going to be saying to Job. And we're about done with that part of the book. So Job will say the things that he does. And once again, there is the agreement that wicked people, that their day is coming, whether it's in this life or after this life, they're still going to have to deal with their wickedness. And God will not be silent on those things. And here Job realizes that's the truth. But what I've done is nothing like what they've done. I'm not among their group, and yet my problems persist. So again, it's such an impasse that they are at, that neither side is listening to the other. Neither side has the answer. The three that are speaking against Job are way off base. What Job just cannot understand is why God is allowing this to take place, since there's no fault of his own. And we look back at the first two chapters and know exactly why all of this is taking place. So we have the benefit of being able to know the backstory to it, and it's yet to be revealed to him, and it's still going to be some time. Now, how much time has elapsed since the very first events to where we are in chapter 20? There's no way of saying. So we know that it's weeks or months, because there's no way that what happened to him would reach his friends and then they could come together and come to meet him. It's taken some time. We're not sure exactly how long, but it would have been a length of time. And how long this whole dialogue takes, again, it could happen very quickly. This whole back and forth could happen in just an afternoon, if you will, or in a day. So we're not really given a lot of details when it comes to that, but none of that is important. We don't have to know any of those details. They have nothing to do. They don't change the story in any way at all. So what we just look at is, again, the back and forth. What do we do is glean ourselves. What can we take away from this, other than if God has put us in a place where somebody has a very difficult situation in front of them, and somehow we have been put into the position where we can offer comfort and peace to them, then we should do so and not kind of come to some kind of conclusions that we can't support. So again, they make all of their accusations against him. He has denied them, and denied them consistently, and that's not good enough for them. So they continue to say the things that they're saying. And this is human nature. We've all probably been in this situation. The more that an argument goes, then the longer or the much more it devolves into something that it never should have. And then it becomes personal, and then it becomes almost angry and vindictive. And that's where we are at this point. You'll see it. And Job's already called them useless to him. They've already called him a liar. And now they equate him among the wicked. So really interesting what's gone on here, and tragic. So chapter 20 is where we are. Let's have a word of prayer and let's take a look at the text. Father, we thank you. As we come to your word, we can seek you for understanding. We can seek you for knowledge. We can ask of you, and you can help us to understand what is put before us in the text and why should it matter to us. So we ask, God, that you would give us great wisdom and understanding as we read, and that you would help us to make proper application to, again, what we read and how we might be able to use this in whatever situation you put us in. And we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen? All right, so again, you're not going to get a lot of what we would consider doctrine through this. You'll get some theology. There are some interesting things about how God does what he does. And again, this would be, if you're in the thick of it, if you're one of the counselors, none of this would make sense. And so the idea that they're kind of all over the place on their assessment of this thing, I guess shouldn't come as any great surprise. But nonetheless, they do reach some pretty odd conclusions, and yet they're doing so without any kind of real knowledge of the facts. So, verse 20, or chapter 20 rather, verse 1, Zophar answered and he said, now this is, again, Job has had his say, and remember, we're coming off the 19th chapter where I know that my Redeemer lives. I will see him face to face. It was just a real fascinating look at something, an insight that he had that is so far beyond what we would have thought is knowledge at that time of a pre-existent Redeemer. So he says, therefore, my anxious thoughts make me answer because of the turmoil within me. I have heard the rebuke that reproaches me, and the spirit of my understanding causes me to answer. So this is flowery language to basically say, what you've just said, Job, it's such a personal offense against me, because he takes it personal, what Job has said, that I can't help but say what I'm going to say. You know, I would have kept my peace, except you had to have attacked me and said the things that you did. So I'm going to have my reply. I'm going to say my piece, and I'm going to have at you as he feels, you know, he's been offended. So he's going to go ahead and retaliate in this. So at verse 4, do you not know this of old, since man was placed on the earth, that the triumphing of the wicked is short? It only lasts for a while. Whatever victory they may have, it's only for a short time. And the joy of the hypocrite is but for a moment, though his haughtiness mounts up to the heavens, and his head reaches to the clouds. So in the opening statements of this, he puts Job in that place of the wickedness, and he wants him to know, for all of what you're doing, you're only going to be able to do this for a limited amount of time, and all of your pridefulness and all of the things that you say and your haughtiness and raising your head up to the clouds, that's coming to an end. You can go ahead and pronounce to us all of your protesting that somehow you're innocent, but that's going to come to an end. God's not going to allow it to endure forever. Yet he will perish forever like his own refuse. What a horrible thing. When you look at this and say, what do you mean by his own refuse? Yeah, it's what you think, his own waste. So, yet he will perish forever like his own refuse. Those who have seen him will say, where is he? He will fly away like a dream and not be found. Yes, he will be chased away like a vision in the night. The eye that saw him will see him no more, nor will his place behold him any more. His children will seek the favor of the poor, and his hands will restore his wealth. So this is talking about not only after he's gone, nobody's going to remember him, but even the kids after him, his children, the people of his family are going to have to make good on the things that he's done. And so that idea that his children are going to seek out the poor, and by his own hand, he's going to have to basically pay back. Now he gets to the point of saying basically what's been stolen. And so this is an accusation of against all of this is just, it's example after example after example of conclusions that they've jumped to, none of which have any merit. So by this time, it's no longer a question of saying, well, Job, did you maybe do this? Did you maybe do that? Kind of seeing if there's some way that maybe somehow, if Job has missed something, by suggestion, maybe they can come to it and get this whole thing back on track. Now they're just totally presumptuous about a whole bunch of things. And really pretty much at this point, they're just saying, well, since bad things are happening to you like we assume would happen to the wicked, you must be guilty of all the things that the wicked people do. So the idea that they must have exploited the poor because now his kids, the people after him, whatever that would mean, they're going to have to go back and make good on what he's done, because he is the one who has been the thief in this. And you're going to see that as we work through these, some of the accusations in these next few chapters is along those lines. Job has been the one who has extorted. He's been the one who has lent money at exorbitant prices. He's into usury and all of those kind of things, taking pledges from people and plundering their goods. That's what they're accusing him of. So just crazy, crazy stuff. Verse 9, the eye that saw him will see him no more, nor will his place behold him any more. His children will seek the favor of the poor, and his hands will restore his wealth. His bones are full of his youthful vigor, but in the end he will lie down with him. They will lie down with him in the dust. So even though he's the things of his past, though he may still seem like he's part of his youthfulness, it's all going to catch up with him. Even in his older age, everything that he's done up to that point, all the things of his past are going to come back, and they're going to have to lay in the dust with him when he's dead. It's just that idea that none of this stuff lasts forever. And really that's kind of the picture. You're going to get that here, that from those who try to offer him counsel, that's repeatedly the thing. This can't go on forever. Sooner or later, you're just going to have to pay the ultimate price. God will not be mocked. You're going to have to pay the price for it. So we can look at passages in other places in the text, like if, let's say that this is happening 2023 as I'm recording this. We know the passages that say that God is not mocked. That which a man sows, that will he also reap. And there may be times when that's applicable. In this case, if Job was all of the things that they accuse him of, then there's merit to what they're saying here. And yet they're saying and making all of these assumptions, but they have no evidence and no proof for it. So they're, again, just become more and more. They just begin to heap upon him. Well, what do wicked people look like? This is kind of what you're seeing. What do wicked people look like? What do they do? What qualifies them for being classified as wicked? And whatever that might be, then Job must be those things too. And that's where their accusations are going. They've never observed these things in him because they aren't there. If they were, if any of this stuff was what Job was actually doing, then God would have never looked at him and called him upright. And that's how he refers to him in the first couple of chapters. So God's taking into all of this to account because it's all going to come up. Now, verse 12. Though evil is sweet in his mouth, and he hides it under his tongue, though he spares it and does not forsake it, but still keeps it in his mouth, yet his food in his stomach turns sour. It becomes cobra venom within him. He swallows down riches and vomits them up, and God casts them out of his belly. So this idea that all of his lies and his protesting otherwise, it's going to be something that ultimately becomes so sickening to him that he even himself is going to have to be rejecting of those things. He can't even put up with his own things. God's going to see to it that even in his prosperity, so he thinks, as he tries to consume things, God won't give him any rest from it, and he'll vomit right back up whatever it was that he has. Now, if they mean that in the literal sense, it more looks like it's being spoken of in the kind of in metaphor, is that everything that he thinks is going to work to his benefit, God will not allow. That which he thinks is favorable is going to make him sour as far as his stomach. That which is looking good to him to partake in is going to be rejected, and God will see to it. So, you can get in the big picture. We're able to basically look at this and say, we look at it from the New Testament sense and say, wicked people, we see them all day long, and we watch them come and go from this planet one after another. They live a life of all kinds of privilege, and then they die. And it seems like justice is never done. But let's remember, we have a much better perspective of this than they would have at this time, because even if we believe what they believe about wicked, we would understand that the wicked are going to be among us all the time. And we will see good, solid people go through a very difficult life. We've talked about this already during this study. And then there's other times when you see some of the most awful people that there are, who have all kinds of very horrible plans for people, live a life of real comfort and peace, and yet once they die, then they're going to have to deal with the eternal consequences of all of their wickedness and their rejection of God, which really was the reason why they did the things that they did. God would never have them do such things. So our counsel would have sounded by leaps and bounds. It would sound different from this because we know what we know from the scriptures. And in this case, to try to do the parallel, if we could, from what we see here, since they're all talking about their knowledge of God, we would just say, oh, let's put these four people in the same camp of being believers in their time, and then saying where we are here today, as we had four people who are all believers. The counsel is going to look a whole lot different if it's become biblical, or if it is used biblically. The people that would be sitting down around a table, if you will, one man who has had just unimaginable calamity and his friends come to visit him and minister to him, there are so many things that these guys assume that you would never come to that conclusion in the New Testament sense. So, once again, it would also be pretty obvious whether or not the things that he says he has or has not done, it would be a lot easier to find out whether or not he's really guilty of all the stuff that they're accusing him of, because the witnesses would be everywhere. But at the same time, God doesn't punish everyone else for the sins of the person here. So God doesn't wipe out families, as has been here, just because of the actions of the father in this case. So that's just that'd be a punitive way of looking at God. So the thought that they could even think that something like that would happen, short of this, I don't understand why his whole family is gone, but God would not allow something like that to happen unless there was a reason for it. It just doesn't, but God doesn't have to be the cause of it, and he's not the cause of it. We know from the first and second chapters of this. But again, the counsel would sound a whole lot different if it's biblical in our day and age than what they've done here. And really, a comforter at this point would have been able to say, I have no idea why this has happened. None of us can know this. Until God communicates that, we don't know. But here's what we do. This is a temporary life that we are all in. Let us come and pray with you, and let's just seek the Lord and see if he has some answers, and we'll see what we can glean from this and what can be learned of it. But God does not do things punitively. So this is, of course, long since past that. Now, it says in verse 17, verse 16, he will suck the poison of cobras, and the viper's tongue will slay him. He will not see the streams, the rivers flowing with honey and cream, and he will restore that for which he labored, and will not swallow it down. So everything that he has amassed to himself will be taken away. He's not going to be able to keep it and retain it. From the proceeds of business he will get no enjoyment, for he has oppressed and forsaken the poor, and he has violently seized a house which he did not build. Again, they have no evidence for this, but that's what wicked people do. And so, because of the calamity that they see that's happened to him, it must be because he's a wicked person. So let's just throw everything at him that we know about wicked people. And so this is the point where they're basically saying, all right, Job, you've been saying that you're innocent. That's fine. You can plead your innocence all the time, but take a look around. Look at what's happened to you. Clearly, you're among the wicked. And here's what you can expect more of as you go forward, because this is what happens to wicked people. So you can see why Job is pretty sick of him. Verse 20, because he knows no quietness in his heart, he will not save anything he desires. He won't be able to keep it. It'll slip through his hands. Nothing is left for him to eat, therefore his well-being will not last. In his self-sufficiency he will be in distress. Every hand of misery will come against him, which he is about to fill his own. When he is about to fill his own stomach, God will cast out on him the fury of his wrath, and will rain it on him while he is eating. So again, this here's an interesting thing. At this point, Job has already said, God is my oppressor. I don't know why that. He pursues after me. He won't leave me alone. And when I try to cry out to him, he won't answer. And so the picture that's being, said over and over by Job gives the impression it's like, yeah, I'm just being driven. I can't get away from him. He pursues me and he does all these things. It opens the door to these guys to be able to say this kind of thing. Everything that you try to do from this point on, God will continue to be your oppressor. So it just takes on a life of its own at this point. So when he's about to fill his stomach, verse 23, God will cast on him the fury of his wrath and rain it on him while he is eating. He will flee from the iron weapon, and a bronze bow will pierce him through. It is drawn and it comes out of his body. Yes, the glittering point comes out of his gall. terror comes upon him. So he might escape one weapon, but another weapon's going to get him, like warfare kind of a thing. And the idea that it's taken out and it's about gall and glitter just means that it's pierced all of the internal organs. He's not going to survive this. He's in a place of terror. Total darkness is reserved for his treasures, and an unfanned fire will consume him. The idea that even the slightest of things will take him out. It shall go ill with him who is left in his tent, so his posterity, those people that would be with him. The heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. The increase of his house will depart, and his goods will flow away in the day of his wrath. This is the portion from God for the wicked man, the heritage appointed to him by God. Now, it's kind of an interesting thing. When you read this, you think, okay, that's already happened to him, if you think about it. That much of what was just said there, that is really kind of what awaits the wicked man, is kind of what's already happened to him in the first couple of verses. So it would appear as though, if he's saying, look, this is what happens to the wicked, so Job, take a look at your own life and make your own application. Okay, well, you can see how he's not at the point of making accusation. This would be like if a person has gotten to the point of saying, all right, you don't want to hear us say that you're obviously guilty, but let me just point out the big picture here, Job. This is what happens to wicked people. Interestingly enough, it looks just like what's happened to you. So you just need to know this, that God won't honor anything. You'll find no satisfaction in anything. When you're gone, your kids are going to have to clean up your mess, and they're going to have to make good on all of the wrong that you've done. So you can see why there is just, in Job, you would think this is a man who must be seething at this point. Now see, Job's not quite sarcastic in this, but you probably are doing the same thing. If you're listening to this, you're thinking, well, if I was in that position, how do I think I would answer that? What would be my reply to that whole thing? And I can say for myself, I tend to be a little bit sarcastic about things, especially like this. And if I have a bunch of people just pointing the fingers at me and everything else, then I'm going to probably answer it in such a way that's not, well, gosh, guys, thanks so much for the input and all the rest of it. I would have asked, look, guys, you came here as my friends, as my comforters, and you've failed miserably. Why don't you do us all a favor and just leave? Or I just, maybe at that point you just get up and walk away. It's like, you guys are completely useless. I'm out of here. But none of that seems to happen here. It just escalates. And now it's actually, I can't even say it's escalated anymore. How much worse could it get? It's kind of plateaued, and they're just saying the same things over and over. The accusations have not changed. They just become more coarse, I guess you can say, and personal. But they're not getting anywhere. Nothing new is being learned here. In chapter 21, rather, we read in verse 1, Job answered. So Job has his reply. He says, now listen carefully to my speech, and let this be your consolation. So his way of saying, look, you came here to console me, so here would be the consolation to me. You want to give me consolation? Then just listen and don't say anything else. Just be quiet. And he says, bear with me that I speak, and then after that, and after I've spoken, then you can just keep on with your mockery. So that's what he views them as at this point. And yeah, it's said in such a way that he's once again reiterating to them, you guys are at this point, I only see you as mockers. You came here to comfort me. You were broken. You threw sackcloth. You tore your robes, rather. You put on ashes, and you wept. You were silent. You were my friends. You were the people who were supposed to offer me consolation, and you were to come alongside and console me. Well, if you want to console me, then just stop talking. And here's what he has to say. Bear with me that I speak, and then after that you can keep mocking. As for me, is my complaint against men? And if it were, why should I not be impatient? So his point is, my whole thing is, this is not caused by man. He realizes that. And he says, if it was, then I would have every reason to be impatient towards man, but that's not the case. My problem and my case here is against God. I want to know why these things are. As for me, is my complaint against men? And if it were, why should I not be impatient? Look at me and be astonished. Put your hand over your mouth. That's a way of just saying, take it all in once again. Put your hand over your mouth. Stay silent. And when I have remembered, even when I have remembered, I am terrified, and trembling takes hold of my flesh. So yeah, I look back on everything that's happened too, And it's terrifying to him, as it should be. So he says, then why do the wicked live and become old? He's going to start to look at, again, remember they're all talking about, here's what the wicked are. Now, notice he doesn't lump himself in with them, because of course, how could he? He doesn't see himself as being one of them. Now, in this, you could probably see there are ways that he might look at them and say, you're the wicked ones, and he does accuse them of their wickedness at some points. Why do the wicked live and become old? Yes, because and become mighty in power. Their descendants are established with them in their sight, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. Their bull breeds without failure, their cow calves without miscarriage. They send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. They sing to the tambourine and the harp, and they rejoice in the sound of the flute. They spend their days in wealth, and in a moment go down to the grave. So, the way of looking back at the life of the wicked, and again, this really hasn't been talked about so much. I mean, we've looked at some other places where you would read in the Bible that the rain falls on the just and the unjust, and Job has made similar things. That even to his wife, he said, should we expect only good things and that never trouble would come to us? He just realized that we shouldn't be able to think that that's part of this existence. There are times that troubles are going to come. So, once again, it has been very one-sided to this point, especially by the counselors, and Job has bought into some of it, that there are times that the wicked do have to deal with things. Their point is, thus far, for the most part, his counselors have been, well, the bad things only happen to the wicked, not to the good. Here Job says, this isn't a question about whether or not the wicked are worthy of judgment and those things happen, but let's be honest, take a look around, because the wicked, they go through a life of relative ease, many of them. So what we really need to kind of pick away from this is that there's no way that you can look at it and say that there's one blanket answer, because you might have people that are really wicked and godless, if you will, who have nothing, and some who have fabulous wealth. There are those who walk rightly before God and have plenty, others who are just as devout in their belief and yet they have little. So there's no one-size-fits-all way of classifying the righteous versus the wicked. So here Job says, there's the wicked deserve the things that they do, and there are times that we'll observe the wicked kind of getting what we think that they deserve. Again, it's our way of justice. But then at the same time, how do you describe, or how do you try to make sense of the fact that you have people who are wicked and yet they prosper? Even in their wickedness, it seems as though they're rewarded for their wickedness. And so here, Job is basically saying, well, for everything that we can agree upon about how the wicked should deserve those things, and sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. So again, this is a good thing for us to remember, especially in our day, because a large part of the church really does believe that if you're saved, and if you know how to deal with the matters of faith, and they believe that the theory goes, the theology that they have, is that faith itself is something that has physical properties. And if you know how it is by speaking things, you can manipulate the physical properties of wealth and of health and everything else, and command it to be to your will. So we call it the word of faith. They believe that if you can speak things into existence because you have the right understanding of faith, you can kind of speak whatever you want into your own existence. So there's an incredible danger with that. And yet we see that it's demonstrably untrue. And so we want to be able to say, look, the churches can go ahead and teach that nonsense all that they want to. They don't have a biblical basis for it. And here's one of those great places that you can look at with Job and realize that if you're going to look at him, he didn't do anything wrong. He's confessed everything and should have been one who lived in favor. He did at one point, and he lost all of it, but it wasn't because he had done anything wicked. It's because there was things going on behind the scenes that no one understood. So interesting, some of the parallels in the weird theologies of our times and the faulty understanding that they had in these times. They should have learned, obviously. We should have learned, I should say, as we understand more about how God does the things that he does. We shouldn't be presumptuous. So look again, starting at verse 9. Just listen to all these things. Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. Their bull breeds without failure. Their cows calve without miscarriage. They send forth their little ones of the flock, like a flock, and their children dance. And so they have the day-to-day comforts of life. Verse 14 says, yet they say, and here's what they say, yet they say, God, depart from us, for we do not desire the knowledge of you. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit do we have from if we pray to him? Indeed, their prosperity is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. So he basically says these are people who do all of those things. What anybody would want, what they would think only is really for people that are right before God. And yet here he says, and yet these same people that have everything there are the ones at the end who say, we don't want any knowledge of God. Why should we pray to him? We have nothing to do with him. He doesn't have any say in the matter. Now, again, that's much of the world today, and it gets more so by the day. And so I can think of a lot of people, I'm sure if you were to think about the wicked people that you know that do some incredibly wicked things, and yet they have all kinds of creature comforts and they'll never want for anything in their entire lives. But if you're listening to me and you're a believer, would you trade places with them? We all know the answer to that because you know what their destination is. The wicked will have to, and like has been said here, there's a day coming when the wicked will be judged for their wickedness. And it doesn't matter what they had in this life, it's not going to translate into the next one. So having a good perspective, if you will, about those things is hugely important. Now, he asks this question, good questions. How often is the lamp of the wicked put out? How often does their destruction come upon them? The sorrows God distributes in his anger, they're like straw before the wind and like chaff that the storm carries away. So even when they struggle with some things, it seems to be here and done just as fast as the problems come, they seem to go away. By contrast, here is Job, who really hasn't had any relief since the first of when all of this happened. And however long it takes for this dialogue to go and then for God to answer and then finally restore, it's clearly not something that happened overnight. And here he's saying even when the wicked have their troubles, it seems like it's over and done with in very short order. So they are like straw before the wind, their sorrows. And when God kindles his anger against it, it seems like it goes away right away. They say God lays up one's iniquity for his children. Let him recompense him that he may know it. Let his eyes see his destruction, and let him drink the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care about him, or about rather his household after him, when the number of his months is cut in half, or when he is cut down? So again, the idea of how fleeting all of these things are. It comes and it goes, and sometimes it is that God will bring them to a place of calamity, but even at that, as Job rationalizes his way through this, that it seems like it comes and it goes, and it doesn't stick around. And by contrast, he's probably thinking of himself, that's not the same thing with me here. But he's not treating Job as a wicked man, as Job presumes wicked people are treated. Verse 22, can anyone teach God knowledge? Great question. Since he judges those on high. One dies in the full strength, being wholly at ease and secure. His pails are filled with milk, and the marrow of his bones is moist. That means that there's vigor, there's well-being in it. Then verse 25, another man dies in the bitterness of his soul, never having eaten with pleasure, they lie down alike in the dust and worms cover them. So again, the rich and the poor, the righteous, the unrighteous, those who have plenty, those who don't. Really, there is no rhyme nor reason to what happens in their life. There is, in some cases, it's very good for either type of person, good or bad. And there may be plenty and there may be nothing. That doesn't depend. There's no standard answer here. This is just the musings as Job goes through this. So again, every one of his answers and every time that he speaks, it's only based on what he knows and what has happened in his personal life. And he would know better than they that he knows the condition of his own heart. He knows how he felt towards God. He knows that he had everything and that it's all been taken away in an instant. He doesn't blame God for it because he doesn't see that he deserved any of it. It was all given to him anyway. So he's able to just kind of say these things, just this is what I know to be true. And so again, there may be people that are wicked and they have everything. There may be those who are not wicked and they have nothing. So again, he doesn't purport himself to be a one who knows all of these things. It's just kind of, as I think my way through this, these are my conclusions. Verse 27, look, I know your thoughts and the schemes which you with which you would wrong me. For you say, where is the house of the prince, and where is the tent and the dwelling place of the wicked? And so, again, this is his way of looking at them and saying, I know what you guys are thinking. And so you would say, where's the dwelling of the wicked man? Oh, that's right, it's been taken away. So this is Job pointing at them and saying, I know what's going on in your mind. You come here and say, well, wicked people have everything taken away. So in this case, where's the wicked man? Oh, there you are, Job. Where's all your stuff? Oh, yeah, it's gone, like all the other wicked things. This is Job looking at them saying, I know that this is what you think. And then it says in verse 29, have you not asked those who travel the road and do not know their signs? And so the point is, have you talked to other people who see what it's like in other parts of the world? You know, you're making all of your assumptions on what you see right here and right now, but what do you really know about how this is everywhere? You're just looking at this one particular situation. It's unknown to you. You haven't seen this somewhere else, so you just come to your conclusions that I've done some kind of horrible wickedness. But if you ask people who get out and go in and see other things, have you talked about those who travel the road? That's a way of saying, those people that see the world, have they seen something like what's happened here? That even a man who's right and honorable, this happens to them for reasons unknown to themselves, something that they didn't cause? Verse 30, for the wicked are reserved for the day of doom. Now, this is his way of saying, but I do know this. The day is coming, then for the wicked are reserved for the day of doom. They shall be brought out in the day of wrath. Who condemns his way to his face? Who is it that would do that? Who would condemn him to his face? And who repays him for what he has done? Yet he shall be brought to the grave, and a vigil will be kept over the tomb. The clods of the valley shall be sweet to him. Everyone shall follow him, as countless have gone before him. How then can you comfort me with empty words, since falsehood remains in your answers? So again, the point is, here are the things that we can see from the observable world around us. But at the end of this whole thing, they've had plenty to say to him. None of it has been on target. And he finally concludes this section here by just saying, how can I receive anything from what you guys are saying, since everything that you have to offer me is based upon your faulty assumption as to me being the cause of this, and that somehow I've brought this calamity on myself? So it's kind of a bitter thing when you stop to think about it, and the way that he's been treated by these people who are presumably his friends is just really, really difficult for him to kind of take it all in, and hard to account for, if you will. Chapter 22 says, now this is what Eliphaz said, a reply. So, can man be profitable to God? That's a great question. And though he is wise and may be profitable to himself, so he may be good to himself and may be seen as somehow wise in his own eyes, but what good is that to God? He's so far beyond that. Is it any pleasure to the Almighty that you are righteous, or is it gain to him that you make your ways blameless? And again, he doesn't believe what Job says of himself, but he basically says, all right, you can go ahead and tell us how righteous and blameless and everything else you are, but what is that to God? What does it matter? You think that you may be thinking that you're impressed with yourself and you're trying to impress us with this? Do you think God's impressed with that? Is it because of your fear of him that he corrects you, so that you purport yourself, or you say, oh, I fear the Lord, and yet it's disingenuous? And is that really why he's judging you, is because you feign that you have some kind of awe and respect for him when you actually don't? Is that why he's actually maybe doing this to you? They're asking him to look at your own life, Job, and quit with all of your outward protests and everything else when inside it's hollow. Verse 5, is not your wickedness great and your iniquity without end? For you have taken pledges from your brother for no reason. That means that you've lent money, you've taken pledges, you've expected them to repay. And so you've stripped naked of all their clothing, You have not given the weary water to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. But the mighty man possessed the land, and the honorable man dwelt in it. That's his way of saying to Job, you've bought up all the land, and you just let the people that you honor live in it. But you've done it at the expense of everyone else. So again, this is what wicked people would do. So the assumption is that's what wicked people do. Job, you must also be somehow guilty of exactly what we're talking about here. You have sent widows away empty, and the strength of the fatherless was crushed. Therefore snares are all around you, and sudden fear troubles you, or darkness, so that you cannot see, and an abundance of water covers you. So this is very similar to what we just heard from the last guy. So it's the same kind of things. All of these things are happening to you. It's just wave after wave, and it's God's punishment. Is not God in the height of the heavens, and see the highest stars, how lofty they are? And you say, what does God know? Can he judge through the deep darkness? Thick clouds cover him so that he cannot see, and he walks above the circle of the heavens. So the point is that they're accusing Job of saying, I can do all of this wickedness, and God's so far off he doesn't see any of it. And so it's not even asking, Job, is this where you're at? It's rather an accusation. This is what you're doing, Job. You think that God doesn't see these things. You think that he can be, you can do these things in the darkness and he can't see. Again, it's an accusation. It's of course wrong. Will you keep the old way which the wicked men have trod? Are you going to continue to be like they were before, who were cut off before their time, whose foundations were swept away by a flood, probably the flood? They're looking back at that. Are you going to be just like those people? They were judged, and so why would you think that you're not going to be judged as well? They said to God, depart from us. What can the Almighty do to them? Yet he filled their houses with good things, but the counsel of the wicked is far from me. He's basically quoting Job back to himself and saying, Job, do you see the irony in this? What you just said is exactly what has happened to you. And yet you're saying that it's those guys that happens to, and yet almost quoting him back to himself, this is what you're saying happens to those guys, but it's what's happening to you. Yet, in verse 18, he filled their houses with good things. By the counsel of the wicked it is far, but the counsel of the wicked is far from me. That's their protesting. That's what they say, but it's not true, as they would think. The righteous see it and they are glad. So what happens when the righteous see the calamity befall the bad people? The righteous see it and they are glad, and the innocent laugh at them. Surely our adversaries are cut down, and the fire consumes their remnant. Now, he turns this, and this would be such good counsel that he gives here if it were right, and that this was the only thing preventing good things to happen to Job. If he would just come clean, God would take care of the needs if you would just come clean. So none of this I would have a problem with. It's just misapplied. Now acquaint yourself with God and be at peace. Thereby good will come to you. Receive, please, instruction from his mouth. Seek God and get direction from him. Lay up his words in your heart and return to the Almighty, and you will be built up. You will remove iniquity from your tents, and then you will lay your gold in the dust, and the gold of Ophir among the stones of the brooks. The Almighty will be your gold, and you will have and all your precious silver as well. For then you will have your delight in the Almighty, and lift up your face to God. You will make your prayer to him, and he will hear you, and you will pay your vows. See, all of that is right. If Job was like they say, if God is confronting you and causing these problems, and basically until you get that straightened out with him, none of this can get resolved. But if you would just do that, if you just make the admission, God, I've wronged you, I've done these awful things, I wouldn't listen to you, you've brought this calamity upon me, so I confess those things, I repent of what I've done, and I look to you to restore. God, whether it's fellowship or even if it's material things, just I put it all at your feet and I ask God that you would restore. That's kind of the heart of what he's saying here. If you would just do this, Job, everything would be well. So there's nothing wrong with the counsel, just that's not Job's problem. He's not that guy. Verse 28, you will also declare a thing and it will be established for you. So light will shine on your ways And when they cast you down and they say, and then you say, exaltation will come, then he will save the humble person. So even if you get put down at another time and you just say, God will exalt me, God will raise me up, then he will do exactly that. And then verse 30 says, and then he will deliver one who is not innocent. Yes, he will be delivered by the purity of your hands. So, God will start to show such favor that even your life will benefit and, start lifting up those people that might not be devout like you are. Who knows? Maybe with the intention of having them come to an understanding as well. He doesn't go into and elaborate any of that, but just the idea that everything that is plaguing you now could be gone if you would just do these things and make it right, and then God would prosper you yet again. So there's always some kind of an element, seemingly, in this, that though there are many things that they assume and are misapplied, every once in a while they say things that, if they understood and they were making a proper application, is good counsel. In this case, it's good counsel, but it's chasing after a bad understanding. So it would never be the thing that would fix Job's problem, because it's not the source of Job's problem. It's not his wickedness. But it's great if we know somebody that's in a place of rebellion against God and saying those kind of things. Of course, we don't talk like this. But the idea to say that, if you would just turn from your wickedness and turn towards the Lord, it may not be that you have everything, in the material sense, but you'll certainly have the peace of mind. You'll have fellowship with God, and you'll have peace, and you'll have comfort, and your oppression would be gone. So anyhow, their counsel is almost uniformly the same. And there's nothing really new that is being introduced here. It just is repeating the same things over and over and over again. And for our sake, it should be a good reminder to us that when those times come, we want to make sure that anything that we say, that we're speaking, things of a spiritual nature, we better not assume a thing about it. We better make sure that our words are sure and that there's nothing that we are taking as assumption. Because again, we'd give answers. We're going to have to answer for this. As we will see these people, they're all going to have to answer for the things that they said. So that should terrify us, to make sure that when we say things, that we know that they are correct biblically, and that whatever counsel that we give is something that God would not want to hold us to account for doing wrongly. So we'll pick up at chapter 23 next week, and hope to pick it up at a clip of a couple, maybe 2 to 3 chapters in the next coming weeks. We have some interesting things that will happen at chapter 31, and then it will culminate with God beginning to give answers as he concludes this book. So we're more than halfway through, and we're about halfway through, I should say. And we will be picking up a little bit of the pace here, like we were able to turn 3 chapters. Probably be able to do the same next week until we get to the things that are kind of unique. And it is worth, kind of working our way through this at a little bit better of a pace because of the redundancy of it. It's not like there's anything necessarily new. So we'll pick up again at chapter 23 next week, and look forward to sharing that with you.